Hello and welcome to the Lab 5 video. In this lab we'll go ahead and add a few devices, a gateway, a switch, and a few end devices. We'll go ahead and link them up, assign some IPs, and then we'll jump into the gateway and we'll begin setting it up via the command line. So let's get going. So if we follow the lab topology, we need to add a gateway, so we can use any one of these. Each of these Cisco gateway models, some of them have special abilities that some of them just don't have. In this lab, we don't need anything special, we just need a basic gateway. So we will choose the lowest model. So we can go with this one. And we need to add a switch. But if you take a look at the topology, at least one of the switch links has to have a gigabit uplink. Well, not an uplink, but a gigabit link. So in the last lab we used this one. This one does not have gigabit though. If you pull it out and you take a look at it, move the mouse on top of it, it'll list all of the links that it has, and none of them say gigabit, so these won't do. So we'll go ahead and click it, delete it, and we will go back down to the switches. The 2950T, if we add this one, move the mouse on top of it, this one does have a gigabit down at the bottom. So this one will be okay, we just need one. So this one will suffice. Let's go ahead and move this to the middle. We need a couple of PCs, so let's add those. And we need one of these as well. Now if you take a look at the topology, this is the link that we need gigabit connectivity. This by default does not have a gigabit link. If you move the mouse on top of it, you don't see anything that says gigabit. So to change the module, we'll just click on it once. And this is kind of the back side of the PC. This is the module, the NIC, that's existing in it now. To change it, we need to shut it off, and you will pull this module back into the list. If we take a look at all of these, you can take a look at each one. It'll explain what it is at the bottom. But the one that we need is this one. 1 gigabit NIC that we can use a patch cable with. So we will pull this device into the top slot, and we will boot it back up. We'll go ahead and close out of this window, and let's go ahead and link it up with patch cables. Take a close eye at the topology just to be positive that you plug them into the links that it's supposed to be. And I'll set it up exactly the way the topology wants it. With the exception of this one. In the topology, it wanted us to connect it into gigabit O/1. In this one, we only have gigabit 1/1, but that'll be okay. Once we have physical connectivity, that seems to be about it. Let's go ahead and let's jump into the command line. So most Cisco devices, you'll want to set them up via the command line. You will have some options to set them up via the GUI, which sometimes is applicable, but in this class, if you know it the CLI way, you will know it the GUI way. So it's always best to tackle it this way. If you had been in an actual physical lab, a lot of the times you would just take a laptop and use a console cable to plug into the gateway, and you would use some special tools to be able to log into it. But since we use the Cisco simulation application, it cuts a lot of that out, and it lets you just jump into the CLI just by clicking on the device and then clicking on CLI. And then we kind of get a little command line window just like we would in an actual lab. And if we take a look at it, this is what a Cisco device looks like when it boots up. Let's say it was off and we boot it up. This is all the stuff that'll come out little by little. Since this one is a simulation, it all jumps out at once because it's wicked fast. So you get a lot of, which Cisco IOS it is, which device. It'll give you a lot of the legalities, If we keep going down, it gives you some contact info, and then it'll give you some of the physical specifications and its usage specs. But essentially, once we get all the way down to the bottom, with a lot of these Cisco devices, you can set them up manually, or you can kind of set them up in a guided method using the config dialog. This will take you by it step by step. You can assign a host name, you can assign some IPs, a lot of the basic things, it's kind of automatic. But we don't like automatic. Sometimes it guesses, and it doesn't guess the way that it's supposed to. So we will do this in a manual sense. So we will select no. If you select no, it just dumps you into the CLI. It has no settings. Most of the links and the availabilities will be disabled by default. So that means we manually have to go in, assign it a name, assign passcodes because we want it to be safe, and assign IPs to any of the links that we want to be active, and then enable those links. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. So as you know, inside of the book, we have multiple modes when logging into a Cisco device. We have exec mode, we have privileged exec mode, and then we have the config mode as well. Each level has its own abilities. Some commands you can't do in specific levels, it just won't let you. And that's to keep the config safe. So as an example, if we want to do anything like change the host name, we need to jump up into the config mode. So we will type in enable to go from exec mode into privileged exec mode. Once we go into privileged exec mode, we need to go into config mode. So we will use config terminal. And you can tell as we jump between different modes. This is exec mode, enable mode, or also known as privileged exec mode. And then we have config mode. Config mode is the highest one. You can change just about most of the nitty details like IPs, host names, commands that'll have big impact on the device. So inside of config mode, we can type in host name, and we'll assign it what the lab wants us to. So if we take a look on the side, this is the old host name. As soon as we submit this command, it's going to change it. And then let me show you what it does. Let's go back a mode. Anytime you want to go back a mode, like from config mode down to enable mode, we can type in exit. That'll take us back into enable or privileged exec mode. Let's say we wanted to change the host name in this mode. It's not going to let us. So we'll type in host name, and let's slightly change it. Let's change it from A to B. It'll say it's invalid input, and while this is kind of vague, just know that a lot of the times, one, you've messed up the syntax, and if that's not it, usually it's because it's not in the mode that it's supposed to be. So just keep that in mind. So now that we've changed the host name, we want to put a passcode on the privileged exec mode, also known as enable mode, because once you get into enable mode, you can actually show a lot of the statistics and begin to change things inside of the gateway that could impact it in a big time. So you want to set a passcode on it so nobody can go into it except the people that have it. So the way that you'll set a passcode on that, we'll go ahead and go back up into config mode. And we will type in enable. And one of the nice things about Cisco is it has a lot of tools built in to make you efficient. One of the ones is command guessing in a sense. So you can type in enable and then put in a question symbol. And it's going to suggest possible command input that you could possibly type in. And it's only going to give you the ones that will actually fit. So in this instance, since we wanted to type in an enable password, we'll go ahead and type in enable password. If the lab calls to do a secret, you'll do that one as well. And since the lab calls to do that, we'll go ahead and follow the lab. So we'll do that. I still don't know if that command's complete, so we'll go ahead and put a space and then a question. And it looks like it still wants input. So we have a few options. We can do the passcode in plain text, in coded encrypted text, a line, which I don't know what that is, and a level, which doesn't apply to us, so we don't need to know what that is as well. We just want to do a plain text, so we'll do this. And we'll type in the passcode. In fact, let's assume that we didn't know what it wanted us to type in. Let's do the question. And now it actually wants us to type in the passcode. So let's type in the passcode that the lab wanted us to type in, which is this. We'll go ahead and submit that command. And it looks like it accepted it because it didn't give us an invalid input, so it looks like it's good. So let's go ahead and test it out. Let's go back a few modes. Let's exit out of config mode, exit out of privileged exec mode. This will take us all the way back to exec mode. And let's say we wanted to go up a level into enable or privileged exec mode. So we'll type in enable. And aha, now it wants us to type in the passcode that we set. So let's type it in. Now it lets us go up. And if we wanted to, we could go into config mode. And it'll let us in. Well, that just gives you one additional level of safety. So the next thing that it wants us to set up is a console passcode. So let's stay inside of config mode because that's the mode we need to be in. And let's go into line, console. We only have one console, so we can only type in one digit. And anytime you see this, you have no additional options that you can type in. So this command is complete. So we will submit this command. And as you can see, now it's not just in plain old config mode. It's in config mode for the line console that we just typed in. So the commands that we'll be typing in now will only apply to line console O. So let's go ahead and type in a question. We have all of these commands available to us. The one that we need to do is we want to set a passcode, so we will use this one. So let's type that out. And we could put a option 7. Or we could also just type in the passcode and it'll just be in plain text. So let's just type out a passcode. In an actual business, you don't want this stuff in plain text, so you'd want to, put option 7. So instead of just typing that, you would actually put this, but we won't do that. We will just keep it basic. So we added a passcode to that. And that's all we needed to do, so let's get out of this. Let's exit. This will take us out of config line mode and take us down to config mode. Now, in the next step, we needed to add a VTY passcode, which is the telnet passcode. So let's go into line TTY. Actually, not TTY, VTY. Now, on a Cisco device, you have a lot of VTY lines that you can possibly log into from a distant machine. You have up to 15. We don't want to open up all of these lines. We just want to keep a few of them open. So we will begin with the first line, which is this one. Let's just say we only want to open up 5 lines, only some of them. So we want to config between the first line, which is line O, all the way up to 5. So let's type that in. This will take us into config line mode, but it'll only impact these specific lines, the VTY O to 5 lines. So let's go ahead and type in a question again. I like using the question quite a bit. Sometimes you think you may save time just by typing out the commands as you think you know them. Sometimes with the basic ones you may know them, but sometimes you just end up goofing things up. So I like to be positive that that command actually exists. I like to have it guide me along if it's available. So let's set a passcode. It looks like it's available. So password. And let's type in a question. Let's see what else it wants. Once again, we have the option of encrypting this passcode. If we put an option 7, but we won't do that. We'll just type it out. Attempt to keep all the passcodes the same as to what the lab indicates, especially since you'll be handing in these assignments. If we don't know the passcode, we can't get into it, and we don't know if you set it up. So you got to keep it the same. Okay, that one was accepted. We didn't get any invalid messages. So we finished setting up the VTY passcode. Let's go ahead and jump on to step 6. And now we actually get into setting up the IPs and assigning them to specific links on this gateway. So we want to exit out of this mode because we don't want these commands to apply to the VTY. We want them to apply to the Fast Ethernet 00. So let's exit. We want to stay in config mode, but let me show you something. Let's go back into privileged exec mode. Let's imagine that we thought we could assign an IP inside of privileged exec mode, which we all know we can't. But let's imagine that we could. You always begin like with this command, but it's unrecognized. It doesn't even know the beginning of this command. So let's jump up a level. Inside of config mode, it does know what that command is because it does exist inside of config mode, as we can see. So anytime you want to assign an IP or change the details to a specific interface, you'll begin by going into this, type in a question. This is the multiple interfaces that we have on this Cisco device, this specific model. We have all of these, but if we take a look at the topology, this is the one that we want to change. So let's type in FA. You may have noticed that I'm completing my commands kind of fast. The way that you do that is as you begin to type out the command, once it gets unique enough, like FA, if you take a look at the available options that we had, this is the only command that we have that begins with FA. So as long as we type in something unique enough about that command, we can just type in tab and it will auto-complete it. So that's one of the nice things that I like. So once we've auto-completed that, let's see what else it wants. It wants us to pick a specific one on this Cisco device. So if we take a look at the topology and step 6, it wants us to config this specific one. So let's go into this. That's all the command needs. And if we type in a question, it tells us, just push return. That's all you need. This will take us into config IF, which is config interface. Once you go into this mode, we'll type in question. These will be all the available commands that we can begin to type in. We just want to assign an IP. So to assign an IP, we just type in IP address. And it wants us to type in the IP in decimal notation. We could also set it via DHCP, but on gateways you want to set these up via static. So we'll type in IP and look at step 6. And I'm using a slightly modified IP scheme, but the same concepts apply. So 10.10.10.250. Put a space, put a question, and now it wants the IP subnet mask in decimal notation as well. So if we take a look at the IP scheme table in the lab documents, we want to use 255.255.255.0, and that is the complete command. So we will go ahead and submit this command, and it is now assigned. So I just used a slightly modified IP. I can't put it exactly the way the lab is and you would be able to copy it exactly the way that it was. But the same commands kind of apply. You get the gist of it. So once we've assigned the IP to this specific Fast Ethernet 00 interface, we have a question. It says, what does O/O mean relative to this device? So this was kind of confusing to me back when I began with Cisco, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up some visualizations. So anytime you see, Fast Ethernet O/O, 1/1, maybe you'll see, what's a good one? Oh yeah, serial 1/O. Um, Ahead of the slash, this is always the slot that you can stick it in. So a lot of these slots, as you'll notice in the back of these devices, they have these little bolts that go into these, and you can actually pull out these modules. And each device, some of these they only have 2 slots, some of them have 6 slots. Typically, as you go up in cost, the device's amount of slots go up because you can expand its functionality. Um, so if we look at the name O/3, this is slot O, and then this is the link on this specific slot. So this one has a few links, and this one is the second one. This one is the third one. So that just gives you an idea. Usually it's slot and then link. So going back to this, let's go ahead and go to the next step. Let's go to step 7, which talks about the no shut command. So going back to the beginning, I was telling you that a lot of Cisco devices, they come completely disabled. They don't assume anything, and most of the links come disabled because you don't want anything active as you plug it in. You don't want it to be active and you have open holes into the device. So even though we've assigned an IP, this link is still down. So to take a good look at that, I want to show you something. Let's exit out of this specific mode. Let's go exit, exit. We'll even exit out of enable mode. Now in exec mode, we can show running config. Oh, nope, we cannot do it in this mode. We will need to enable show running config. So anytime you type in commands to a Cisco device, it goes into a config file, which is kind of like a text file. This is what, when you boot up, this is what it takes a look at. Now, when you change the commands, it goes into this config file. But you also have this file. This is the one that's saved, and let's say, we unplug this device at the moment and we plugged it back in. All of the commands that we just typed in would be lost because we didn't save it. We didn't change it, save it from the running config into the boot up config. So we'll show you how to save it in just a minute, but let's show the active config at the moment. So beginning at this line, this is the config file to this device. So that enable passcode, it's encrypted. This is the hostname command that we typed in. As we go down, this is the IP that we assigned to this specific link. This is some built-in commands that got saved on it. Duplex auto, speed auto. It'll auto negotiate a lot of the physical linkage. But this is the big one, shutdown. We didn't type in shutdown at any point. Shutdown is implicit. Until we tell it to not shut down, this specific link will be shut down. So now that we know that, let's show you how to negate that. Let's show you the no shutdown command. So at the moment, we got the pound sign, so we know it's in privileged exec mode, enable mode. So let's go back into config. Let's go back into that specific Fast Ethernet O/O interface. So to do that, O/O. And what you'll want to do once you get inside of this specific link is you'll type in no shutdown. And immediately, as soon as we type that in, since we have cables plugged into this, it notices a state change. Now this state is up because it's plugged in, we've assigned it some details, and we've negated the shutdown command. We told it to not shut down, which means it's active. Now it is up. And as you can see on the side, we have a blinking light. If you go back a few minutes in the video, you'll see this one was yellow. And then now we've got yellow on this one as well. So we'll go ahead and jump to the next step. It's going to kind of touch up on what we just talked about. We cannot do the show IP int brief command in this mode. We need to go back. You'll notice that a lot of the show commands, you can't do them in config mode. You can't do them in privileged exec mode. Some of them you have to do in exec mode. So let's go exit. Show IP. Now if you take a look at the lab, that one actually had this command. This is kind of a concise edition of this command. But like I said, as long as this command is unique enough that it's not going to confuse it with something else, it's okay. So oops. I was going to wipe all this out, but we'll have to wait on this. While it's doing that, we'll kind of explain what this one is. So the show IP int brief command shows you the statuses and the IPs of most of the links on this device. So since we only have two, this is the one that we assigned the IP to. Since we did the no shut command, which means it's active, the status is up, protocol is up, so it's communicating. So that's good. Now, in the last step as well, it wants us to ping a lot of the PCs that we have, a lot of the end devices, just so we can double check connectivity. So we'll go ahead and close out of this one. Go ahead and don't pay attention to this, that's a goof up. We have yet to assign the IPs to these devices, so let's get that done. You can do them at the beginning, you can do them at the end, but just keep in mind that you won't be able to test connectivity until you have IPs assigned to all of them. So let's do that. So just like in the last video, we'll click on the device, we'll go to desktop, we'll go to IP config. We want to set a static IP, so once again I'm using a slightly modified IP scheme, but that's okay. Concept still applies. Oops, way too many 10s. 10.10.10.1. Subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Now in the last video we didn't use a default gateway because it was just communication via a switch. We didn't have a gateway. We do have a gateway now. So this is the gateway. So we want to type in the IP to this gateway. So that was 10.10.10.250. We don't have any DNS, so we don't need to type that in. And whoops. Let's go ahead and go into IP config. And if we take a look at the and actually I made a mistake. This one I typed in the IP to PC1. We need to type in the IP to S1 in the table, so let's do that one instead. And then we'll go to this one. This one is 10.10.10.2. So we have the IP, the subnet, and the gateway. We will close out of this. We will set up the last PC. Now, one of the things that I'll note is in this lab, the main objective was to be able to know how to set up a basic gateway. Now, yes, in all actuality, on these PCs, we did not have to type in a gateway. They will still be able to communicate via the switch, even if we took this out of the equation, but we typed in the gateway anyways. So now that we have all the IPs assigned, you can test connectivity on the Cisco device. You could also have tested them on the PC, and I'll show you both ways. So let's exit all the way to the beginning. In exec mode, you can type in ping, and let's ping S1. So 10.10.10. This. Now the Cisco ping doesn't look exactly like the Windows ping, but it's somewhat the same. Once you ping it, it sends 5 packets, just like on the Windows machine. This is the size of the ICMP echoes, which is a ping. It's sending it to this machine, which is this one. So we sent a ping packet from this to this to this. And we will wait up to 2 seconds until it times out. We didn't have any timeout, so it looks like we sent 4 packets. We sent 5 packets, only got back 4 packets. So we had a little bit of signal loss. But let's do it again. Sometimes that's just a fluke. The initial time that you communicate, things may get lost, so let's check it again. This time we had full connectivity, and we'll do it one last time just to double check. Yes, full connectivity. So you may see that on the initial time that you ping a device, once you've set up a new LAN, you may lose some packets, but it's finding its way. So we know we can ping from the gateway to S1. Let's ping this one. So let's go to ping 10.10.10.1. Sending 5 packets. We lost 1 packet again, but since this is the initial time that we communicated via this path, let's do it again. This time, full packets, so we didn't lose any, so that's good. So we know we can communicate with that one. Let's do the last one, the .2, which is gateway to switch to this PC and back. Same thing with this one. We lost a packet, but we know that's common. The subsequent times we shouldn't have any packet loss, which we don't. So we know how to test connectivity via the Cisco device now. Let's go ahead and close it out. Let's imagine we wanted to open up the PC and test connectivity to the Cisco device. We accomplish that by testing connectivity this way. It should apply both ways, but just so you know what it looks like. So anytime you want to ping a Cisco device, you could ping it by its name if we had DNS enabled, but we don't. So we have to ping it by its IP. Now, while a Cisco device could have multiple IPs, in this lab we only set up one IP. We set up the 10.10.10.250 IP. So we will send that. So what it's doing is it sent a ping packet from this machine to the switch to the gateway. If we take a look at the gateway, one of these was the 10.10.250. So it sent it to the gateway, back to the switch, back to this PC, and it did that a few times. So this is how many packets we sent. This is how many we got back. We did not lose any packets. So that's a good thing. So now we have set up a few devices, a few end devices, a switch, a gateway. We've linked them all up with patch cables, and we've done the basic setup on the Cisco device. You know how to change the host name. You know how to set up multiple kinds of passcodes to, boost up the safety of the device. We know how to set up the VTY passcodes, and we know how to at least enable one of the links, at least the fast Ethernet O/O link. We know how to enable it and assign an IP. As soon as we did that, we almost had instant connectivity. That's the only thing that was missing. So, good job, and that's the end of this video. And one last thing. One thing you'll also want to do, and I did not do this, and sometimes it has come back to bite me. You'll always want to save, and you'll want to do it at least once in a while. I didn't do it a single time. Typically each 5 to 10 minutes back when I was in school, I would save it. One time I had an outage and my whole machine shut down, and since I didn't save it, I lost all my stuff. So it's always a good idea to save it. We'll just save this one as Lab 2 Test Student. You'll always want to save these and submit these via Canvas. Once we've done that, I will show you one last thing as well. You'll always want to save the config file from the active config to the boot up config. So the way you do that is, let's exit all the way back out. You'll go into it, and we'll go into enable mode. Type in the passcode. And inside of enable mode, you can do this command, copy. This command, exactly as it sounds, it takes the config file, all the ones that we had been typing the commands into, in the active config that's in use, and it will save it to the boot up config. So you always want to do this. This is the destination file name. We want to leave it as its default name, and that's that. That'll save it. We'll save it one last time. Anytime you close out of these labs, it's going to ask you again. We just saved it, but just to be safe, we'll click on yes once again. And that's that. Thank you once again.